So I have not covered this person before. This person being Arielle Scarcella. I know a little bit about them. I know that they apparently are one of the how I left the left types of people. Suddenly there were too many crazy leftists and they became super grifty for conservatives after this point, from what I understand. Now, if I am wrong in my framing of that, let me know in the comment section below. But that seems to be the reading that I've gotten from this individual. What I'm going to be covering today is a video of hers that was released very recently, and it's called Non-Binary is Confusing at Best and Sexist at Worst. Now, I personally don't see how non-binary is confusing, but maybe she'll be able to give us some framing.
And vape lovers. So today's topic is non-binary, and as a member of the LGBT community, this comes up in conversations an awful lot, and I have never fully expressed what I think of non-binary, if it's even a thing, if it isn't a thing. First of all, I don't think that anyone in the non-binary community even can fully explain what non-binary is.
Wait, okay, so maybe I can offer an explanation. Gender is on a spectrum. More accurately, gender is bimodal. We have two extremes that we generally appeal to. We have what we define as woman and what we define as a man. These are our two extremes in the bimodal spectrum. Non-binary would be practically anything that falls in between these extremes. As far as like not identifying with one or the other in any major capacity. That's it. That's all it is. It's just an umbrella term for a multitude of identities that simply do not conform with one extreme or the other where gender is concerned. That's it. Like, that's... I don't know if I could make it any clearer than that. But I feel like that is the clearest I can give it. Now, because gender is a socially constructed phenomenon, what we consider to be a man and what we consider to be a woman, these are things that we agreed on. These are things that we use. Because these are things that are socially constructed, people who don't conform to these things may have different experiences as to what that means for them. 5 people who are non-binary can have completely different experiences with gender. You can have somebody who's non-binary femme-presenting, somebody who's non-binary male-presenting, somebody who's non-binary who presents androgynously, and each of those 3 people is going to have a completely different idea, a completely different experience of what it meant to be non-binary for them. And that's not even including people who try not to present in any particular way, or people who are gender fluid, who might present one way one day and present another day another day. Every one of these experiences is going to be unique, but they're all going to be under the umbrella term non-binary. Maybe that is what confuses Arielle here. Just as there are some lesbians who end up being circumstantially in a relationship with a male, and then after that one male, there is this no more. That doesn't happen anymore. That is a unique experience that I have known at least 2 lesbians in my life to have engaged in. But not all lesbians have that experience. The experience of being a lesbian is different for each of those people. And yet, I'm sure that there is at least one lesbian who would say that because one of the people that I mentioned before dated a man at one point, they weren't really a lesbian. Because they found themselves attracted at one point, even if it might not be the case anymore, they say that that's not a real lesbian. The exact same inconsistency that you probably have an issue with exists within your own community as well, by example here. But let's see what examples you give, because I've already poisoned the well on what I think we're going to get.
Seems like it's this made-up term that anybody can use for whatever reason they want.
That's how umbrella terms work, Arielle. That's how umbrella terms work. It's like, okay. Let's look at this through the lens of politics. I can say that I'm a leftist, but a leftist, in my experience, as a leftist, I am a socialist. I'm a democratic socialist, but I'm a socialist. Whereas there are other people who are anarcho-communists, authoritarian communists, who I might not necessarily agree with their particular worldviews on how the world should be structured. However, we are all still leftists because it is an umbrella term there. Non-binary as an umbrella term is going to manifest differently for multiple different people. Same thing.
Not male, I'm not female. I'm somewhere floating around in there.
Wait, so you're a girl? You're a trans woman? But you're also non-binary? How is that possible?
Wait. No, that's perfectly understandable. If somebody is born assigned male at birth, and then they transition, to be more femme presenting, however, they are still not fully, like, tied to that particular gender, they still kind of float, it would make perfect sense that they would be a trans woman, but also still be non-binary. Again, non-binary is an umbrella term. It can encapsulate multiple different types of identities.
I don't get it.
Include me in searches for men, women, I don't get it, I don't understand.
I think that non-binary
How is any of that not understandable? What?
is actually a new woke way of saying androgynous, just like wielding a sword of wokeness.
No, that's not... Oh, what? What? Are you a freaking moron? Okay, no, Arielle, listen to me. Androgynous is a term we have used classically to describe phenotypical expression. Somebody would present androgynous as opposed to present female or present male. It is an aesthetic presentation. The aesthetic presentation that you put forward outwardly may not be the same thing as your gender identity. Your identity would be within the umbrella term of non-binary, but you may present andro, or present femme, or present masculine. But at the end of the day, there's not a confusion there. Hell, there can be cis people who present andro, who are wholly and totally married to the gender they were assigned at birth, but have no problem dressing androgynously, have no problem presenting that way.
Over the new term, for validation purposes, for pronouns, for control.
For control over who? What?
I don't identify with having a gender because I found it really restrictive.
It gives me the freedom to express myself. If I wake up one day and I want to spike my hair and do punk rock makeup, I can do it.
So clothes, makeup, the way they speak, the way they act, whatever. And that's one of the reasons I haven't made a video on this topic. No one has really been able to come up with a concise definition.
Because it's an umbrella term. It's not going to have a concise definition because the way that it manifests for each individual person is going to be different. I don't know how many times I need to say the exact same thing over and over again. And speaking of people who don't understand this shit, bye, Tion. I hope you enjoy getting deleted out of the chat. Later. Your deletion is part of the VOD. Hope you're happy. But anyways, I don't know how many times I have to say that the way somebody presents themselves and the way they identify may not be the same. I may be fairly gender apathetic, but I still identify as being cis. I still identify with being male. But look at how I'm presenting on my stream. I am presenting using a female avatar. In this scenario, even though I am using a cartoon, this is a form of femme presentation through somebody who is cis. This is not confusing to me, but apparently to you, this is incredibly confusing. I just don't get it.
For the term non-binary.
You define the labels don't define you. So you can bring your own definition to whatever label.
On my forehead or something.
Yeah.
And secondly, most of the people I know or that I have seen that identify as non-binary are A, very, very young, and B, tend to seem like they are doing it for a very, very political reason, almost like a fuck you to the patriarchy or fuck you for telling me how I should think and act.
Non-binary people don't owe you shit. They can use whatever pronouns they see fit. If they dress femme or mask, don't worry about it, cause it's not your fucking bitch.
Which is funny because you're actually telling people and telling the world that you are taking yourself out of a box by putting yourself in another box. One of the questions.
No, okay, no. This woman is annoying. This woman is incredibly annoying. Okay, look. Arielle, how hard is it for you to understand that if I have a small box and I would like to be defined outside of that small box, I then would like to put myself into a larger box, a more roomy box, a box that has less restrictions? How is that confusing to you? It's not getting out of a box and getting into another box. Being in two boxes does not mean that the boxes are created identically. You can argue that anything is a box. But the size of the box, the contents of the box, everything in the box is going to be completely and totally unique to that type of box, if you want to use the box terminology. If I were non-binary, the box that people could define me in would be much larger, less narrow in scope than a cis box. At least if that was where my comfort area lied. But I feel as though you're not actually confused about this. Part of me feels as though maybe, just maybe, you're doing this on purpose.
Questions I have for the non-binary community is there a difference between somebody that is actually non-binary and transsexual people? So transsexual meaning people that are born one sex and transitioning, even though you can't technically transition to another sex, but...
Define sex, Arielle. Define sex. Because if you define sex via chromosome, well, that's not technically accurate. There are multiple markers we use for sex, though most people don't use the term transsexual anymore. They use the term transgender. Now, is there a difference between these two? It depends. So, if we are using the definition of trans to mean not cis, then every NB person is trans. However, there are some people who do not like that definition and prefer to not call themselves trans if they have not undergone HRT or what have you. That is their business to identify how they wish to. But at the end of the day, the real question here, Arielle, is what answers would you even accept? Like, I'm pointing out to you that a non-binary person is somebody who merely does not fit or does not perceive that they fit the two extremes on the bimodal spectrum. That's it. That's my definition. I like the little bit of transphobia that you interjected into here when you said transsexuals, except you can't really transition. As if nobody was going to catch that shit. Oh, well, I guarantee your audience caught it, and we caught it here. But you are literally purposefully confusing this shit, is what it seems like to me. Again, a non-binary person just does not conform to any of that shit. And then you're saying, what's the difference between this and a trans person? Trans is another umbrella term under which non-binary sits. You're confusing hierarchies and categories.
But visually, secondary sex characteristics trying to appear as the sex they feel more comfortable as. If non-binary simply means just the way that somebody feels or acts, isn't everybody inherently non-binary? You know, like every...
No, not really. So if I wake up tomorrow and I go, I don't actually feel like a guy, but I don't feel like a girl either, I just kind of feel. I could argue at that point that maybe I'm some form of non-binary. That's it. If I am comfortable with the gender I'm assigned at birth and I feel like a dude, then I'm cis. That's it. This is not complicated. This is actually not complicated at all.
Everybody has more masculine and feminine traits somewhere in their head or their body or whatever. Even if it's not...
Yeah, they might have different traits, but how they identify, the stuff that they choose to identify as or with, that's the important part here. That's the part you're missing.
all the time, even if it's just sometimes. It's not normal to be perfectly binary, right? Everybody is kind of on the spectrum. If we're talking about feeling, thinking, and presenting. Because obviously we already know that sex is binary, sex meaning gametes, male, female, sperm, egg, simple, basic stuff. No, intersex is not a third sex. And we know that gender...
Okay, so... not all biologists would agree with you here? Gametes is a simple way of arguing this, but here's the thing. When you're trying to argue what somebody's sex is, you're not going to go check the chromosomal alignment of their gametes. You're not. This is a fun game that transphobes like to play, where they try to say that sex is gametes, or sex is chromosomes, or sex is, whatever the hell. And then when you play that game with them, they then get to define for you what your identity must be. Except your identity is your own. That's where gender comes in. Even if I accept all of your arguments about sex, none of it fucking matters. I don't accept them. There are at least 5 markers that we use when determining sex. But, again, for the sake of argument, I'm willing to accept your definition and accept that it is completely and totally invalid. It means nothing. Also, when you say that that intersex is not a third sex, or however you want to word it, one of my contentions with that would be that your chromosomal alignment is what transfers over and determines your gametes. And if you're intersex, your chromosomal alignment is functionally different, and that affects your gametes. So I don't even know how that's a super useful marker outside of medical reasons to argue from this particular angle. But in whichever case, even granting all that, it doesn't matter.
Gender dysphoria is also a real thing. It has been scientifically credited, right? So what does non-binary mean if it is a physical thing to some of these people? Like, does that mean...
It's not a physical thing. It's an identity. Identities are not physical. Identities are socially constructed. Would you like to know other things that are socially constructed that are useful? Ideas. Would you like to know other things that are socially constructed that are useful? Money. Value. These are things that are socially constructed, and yet we use them all the time. Time is another example. Time is a social construction. We have a measurement of time that is, yes, based on something that we can observe. We can observe that things change over a period of insert thing here until we've come up with the idea, and then we come up with the idea of time, making a constructed, functionally useful thing that technically doesn't exist. Gender is no different than this. It is not a thing that exists physically, that exists tangibly, because it's about identity. It's about what somebody has internalized. This is, again, if you consider this compared to other socially constructed things, time, money, any idea, then it makes sense. It's very easy. But you're pretending it's complicated.
Having partial gender dysphoria, like only having dysphoria on part of your body. And if that was the case, I could get behind that because it is scientifically backed, and it would make sense to me that if...
You're trans medicalist now. That's what you're doing. You're being a trans medicalist. A trans medicalist argues that someone must suffer from dysphoria or go through actual transitioning to be trans. And that's what you're doing right now. And the problem with this is that it gatekeeps an identity behind having to suffer. Somebody has to necessarily suffer with dysphoria, or suffer through HRT, or suffer through getting surgery, or suffer through anything that you would be able to throw on here to be a valid trans person. This is a bullshit idea that gatekeeps things behind unnecessary walls that you apparently get to throw up for no really well-explained reason.
If somebody came to me and told me, listen, I'm non-binary, I feel if I was fully male, meaning like flat chest, testosterone-driven body, producing sperm, having a penis, I wouldn't feel comfortable, and I don't feel comfortable fully as a female either. As far as the law goes, I think that would be very tricky. I think it's
How? No, that would not be tricky. Why does the law even consider? No, why does the law matter for this? The law doesn't matter for this. You can use that this would be tricky where the law is concerned as an argument against shit like slavery. You can use this as an argument against shit like religious freedom. This would be complicated where the law is concerned? Who the fuck cares? Guess what else is socially constructed? The law! The law is socially constructed. You're arguing that one socially constructed thing complicates another socially constructed thing, and I just can't bring myself to care. You know how easy it is to deal with this where law is concerned? You just add in the option of they. That's it. That's literally all you do in most of cases. He, she, or they. You just put those as options on most shit, and you've covered the problem.
becoming increasingly difficult to figure out how to treat non-binary people in the world, because a lot of things are sex segregated or gender segregated or socially sex segregated. As I just said, I think if it is physically and biologically and gender dysphoria based, I can get behind the idea of non-binary, but if it is just...
No. Arielle. So what are you going to do when somebody tells you that they identify as non-binary? Are you going to sit down and probe them for their medical history? You want to talk about things being convenient? You want to talk about things being complicated? You are complicating basic fucking conversation by just engaging in this medicalist bullshit. By arguing that somebody's identity has to be locked behind a medical procedure or a medical issue. That suddenly makes it okay? I think this just complicates things a hell of a lot. And for somebody who's worried about how much it would complicate law, you sure don't seem to be worried about how it would complicate basic conversation.
Something as simple as not fitting gender stereotypes, I actually think that is an incredibly sexist idea.
How is it sexist to merely not identify as male or female? How is that sexist?
What do you guys think, though? Do you think non-binary is a real thing? Why or why not?
Yes and no. It is a real thing and not a real thing. It is a real thing in that it is a real idea that people use and is used as an identity. It is not a real thing in the sense that it is a socially constructed thing. Just like other not real socially constructed things, like time and money.
If it is a real thing, or if it is something that you know could be a real thing, what do you think the definition of it should be? Yes, I am filming this on a different day because apparently I had a lot more to say than originally anticipated.
God, why? Why? That is a face that could kill God. That smile that tells me that we're going to get into more turf nonsense, that could slay a deity.
One of the most important questions I have currently regarding non-binary is, why does being non-binary mean the erasure of female characteristics?
What? What? How? What? What? How? How does non-binary mean the erasure of female characteristics? Kill me!
Let me explain. Why is it that almost every single female-born person that calls themselves non-binary either goes on HRT, testosterone, or at least gets a double mastectomy, top surgery?
Wait. So I got a question. If a non-binary assigned male at birth person shaved their face and lasered off the follicles so that they could not grow hair there again, that would be the same thing. They're removing something that is classically considered a male trait. And that's a thing that happens all the fucking time. Even granting that you're right, if somebody is not comfortable with those gendered traits, then why can't they just take care of that? That's their body. They're allowed to do that. It's not suddenly the erasure of female traits specifically. There are people who will dress differently. There are people who will act differently. There are people who will conform their body to whatever shape is more comfortable for them for dysphoria or otherwise. That is not erasing female traits.
When people who are born male identify as non-binary, usually only just change their gender expression, meaning...
Okay, so I have a question. If a femme non-binary person wears a binder, flattening their chest completely, that is changing their gender expression. But the minute that they do surgery so that they don't have to wear a binder all the time, which can be incredibly uncomfortable, then it's suddenly a problem. Do you have an equal issue with women who cut the size of their breast down due to back pain? Is that an issue for you as well? Like, I love how basic fucking medical procedures to people like Arielle are horrible when trans people engage in them, but when cis people do them for any myriad of reasons, valid or otherwise, then it's probably perfectly fine.
They wear different clothes, they change their hair, they wear makeup. How often do you...
So, every single person that you just showed there looked like they were dressing in skag, which is somebody who is a drag artist, but is keeping many of their male dominant traits when they dress in drag. How am I to know that every person that you just showed there is actually non-binary and not just a group of cis people who are engaging in a subculture of drag? How am I to tell that you're not just shoving that at me because it looked convenient for your argument?
You see someone that's male that identifies as non-binary getting boobs, getting a boob job, or going on HRT. Why does one...
It happens. I actually know several people who were assigned male at birth and went on HRT, but are non-binary, so they are going on HRT so as to androgynize their body, not necessarily fully feminize it, so that they are more comfortable as a non-binary person. That's a thing that happens all the time. Just because you personally don't think that you've seen it doesn't mean it doesn't happen, and doesn't mean it doesn't happen at the same rates.
One sex feel like they have to make physical changes, but the other doesn't. My friend Chad said this really well, I think. Men are taught to decorate their bodies if they wish to express themselves outside of gender norms. Women must bind, hide, disguise, or physically remove their femaleness in order to accomplish the same. I think...
You missed the part where he said, instead of loving every inch. How many times, if you're a trans person in the audience, how many times has somebody told you, why can't you just be comfortable in your body? Why can't you just love yourself? Why can't you just X, Y, Z, whatever? And how many times have you had to tell them, or not tell them because it's not expedient for you to do so, that I am loving every part of me. I am removing the parts that I don't love. I am keeping the parts of me that I like. What part of that is confusing? What part of that is an issue? I love how you just conveniently didn't say that last part, because it almost undermines everything he just fucking said. And it's almost as if assigned male people are built somewhat differently than women who are assigned female. For instance, I have an Adam's apple. That is something that I will never be able to hide, unless I get a lot fatter. There are certain things that I can do to hide it, but that's the thing that I'm not going to be able to hold. My shoulders are decently broad as well. The shape of my body is slightly different. But if I wear certain clothes, I might be able to hide a lot of that. I don't have boobs, for instance. That is something that an assigned female at birth person disproportionately, uniquely has to deal with. But how is decorating someone's body and physically disguising not just the same thing, but worded differently? Read your friend's tweet, please. Men who are taught to decorate their bodies, women must disguise or physically remove their femaleness. How is me decorating my body and shaving, for instance, not the exact same thing as physically removing my maleness via using clothing or anything else. It's disguising, according to you. Moreover, more importantly here, there's another issue at hand with how this is worded. When you say women must disguise so that they can be more NB or what have you, the language here implies that this is fake. The language here implies that the disguise is hiding the real person underneath, and not them outwardly presenting how they actually feel. But none of that was caught by you. None of that is mentioned by you. You just said that it's a perfect analogy. It's great. It's wonderful.
Hide, disguise, or physically remove their femaleness in order to accomplish the same. I think this really all comes down to how does one express being neither gender or neither sex? Is the presence of breasts much more obvious as a gender marker than the absence of them? Why are male...
This is a turf take. Okay, so this is a reframing of another very well-known issue in media, and it's called the defaulting of maleness. There's a wonderful video. I forget the person who made the video. I wish I remembered for the sake of this. Who did an entire video on how Looney Tunes shows the defaulting of maleness. So take Bugs Bunny. Take Mickey Mouse. These are two characters that if you threw them naked onto a screen, we assume male. Instantly. But for us to assume that a cartoon character that is anthropomorphic in the same way is female, you put them in a dress. You have to add things to them to make them look female. This is Arielle trying to reframe this phenomenon, which is a phenomenon that has been pointed out by feminist scholars, and rewording it so that she can use it as a turf. Arguing that females are being forced to strip away their femininity so as to conform to the non-binary. They have to add masculinity onto themselves in order to gain the positive traits that they want. It's literally just a reframing of a good feminist framing device that has been used before, but using it for transphobia. And it's kind of gross.
Males that identify as non-binary only adding to themselves, while females are removing parts of themselves. To me, that suggests...
Imagine if I had to tell her that non-binary people who were assigned male at birth sometimes have to tuck their dicks. That'd be awkward, right? I'm glad the subscribers are covering her face right now. That is a thumbnail-worthy face. That is a very thumbnail-worthy face. We're keeping it.
That the male body type is the default gender. Why is one sex more focused on gender expression, clothes, hair, makeup, while the other is more focused on physical changes, like I said before? Testosterone.
You don't actually have any data on this, though. You're literally pulling this out of your butt. I've spent this whole time arguing why, functionally, people might have to engage in different variations of gender nonconformity, but I think there's a more obvious answer here. Arielle, do you have any data? Do you have any tangible, because you seem to be very, very focused on physically tangible things. Do you have any data on how often people engage in one form of gender nonconformity or another? Because if you don't, this whole argument is pulled right out of your ass.
Testosterone, HRT, top surgery, basically not being perceived as female at all. I'm gonna end the video on...
Well, why would they want to be perceived as female if they're trying to be perceived as non-binary? I don't know if I should keep this one as the thumbnail or the other one. But I'm sure David in the chat is not appreciating me linking random ass images of Arielle for my personal saving for the thumbnails.
On a very controversial note, because I think my friend Chad, who identifies as non-binary, by the way, makes a really good point. He said, in older generations, trans men adopted a variety of masculine looks that fit their personality and often worked to reach an ideal masculine physique. Which I agree. Look at people like Buck Angel. But the current
Of course, Buck would be your fucking position. Of course, Buck is the one you're going to use.
Generation isn't doing that. Is anti-female now equal to teenage boy?
What? Is your friend a moron? I'm sorry. I understand your friend is non-binary. I don't want to invalidate their opinion and how being non-binary actually affects their life. But is your friend actually an idiot? However, a single individual, in whichever way they would like to do so, wishes to conform to the gender they want to show or not conform to the gender that they would like to avoid, however they plan on doing that, however they feel like doing that, is perfectly fine. It's not a societal issue. And again, you're not providing any data. You're providing a handful of tweets and your own ass pull as your method of argumentation here. Unless you have some data on how often people use one form or another, then I'm gonna have to assume that this is all just you being upset that things are changing around you and you can't control them.
He asked why. I think he makes a really good point, and it's definitely up for a debate, and it's definitely a good point to end the video on. Other than that, if you are not subscribed to my
Nope. We do not get your plug. Your plug is not allowed. The only plug allowed here is ddlgplayground.com. Of which I have to say, if you have not gotten something from ddlgplayground.com to shove in your any number of your holes, I would recommend plugging up with those. Best way to do that would be to go to ddlgplayground.com, use coupon code /Suris, and you can get 10% off of anything in there, and it also helps this channel a ton when you do that. That said, I do not... I have no idea why I would subject myself to more of this person's content, though I probably will. It seems to be that the basic form that this content takes shape in is violently misunderstanding basic stuff. Simply not understanding something that is very, very easy to get. There's two extremes in the bimodal spectrum. You're a swing in the middle, and it just, you don't conform to either. That's it. That's all. That's easy. That is so easy to explain and understand, especially if you form it as an umbrella term where multiple people have different experiences under it. It is so much less confusing when you do that, unless, of course, my suspicion is confirmed that this is all just a grift. This is Arielle not actually being confused, but knowing that her audience wants to see someone be confused because they themselves are confused and they want to know that it's okay for them to be confused. They want to know that it's okay for them to not understand these things. And there's ways to engage in that conversation, but the way to engage in it is not to say you don't get it either and therefore it's wrong. But that all said, if you enjoyed this video, I don't know if I can really use that, but if you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and leave a like and go ahead and hit subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps the channel out. And also, if you want to help the channel out and see more of my content, please hit the bell notification icon and also check in the description below to see if there's any way in which you would like to support the channel. Patreon is always a wonderful way. It lets you see behind the scenes stuff on the channel, and it also helps out in one of the best and most tangible ways. I already gave the affiliate link earlier if you want to go support me by getting something over on DDLG Playground. With all that said, as always, everyone, insert end of video tagline here, and fuck Durst.